Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and children of all ages, today we're going to be talking about Hylio, a agriculture spray drone company, and investing into it. So this intrigued me when this came across my desk. I saw a company that, as you guys and girls know, I love agriculture and I love agriculture plus also green energy. So green energy, agriculture, those are two things that go along with me very well. So that has done very well for me in the past, dealing with agriculture companies. Because I guess we all have to eat. That's my way of looking at it. We all will have to eat. They even talking about food shortages and things like that. So I always ask myself, is there a company in position that's going to do better? For prime example, is there a company in position that can help revolutionize that way? And if it is there a way I can invest into it? So Hylio is perfect for that. They are a agriculture spray drone company where they go out and they pretty much they have drones that spray water, all the good stuff like that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a farmer and I'm not going to act like I'm one. But today we have the CEO of Hylio who's going to do a way better job of explaining this company. But we're going to talk about this company. We're going to talk about its finances, its way of becoming profitable, how they're changing the world of agriculture, their competitive advantage, all those things, because they're launching a campaign on Start Engine to where everyday people can invest into this company for a little less $200. Actually, $199 is the minimum investment that they have. So we're going to talk about the problem that they're solving and the solution, all of the great stuff like that. But coming all the way from Houston, Texas, where I just left for a couple of days ago, from Richmond, Texas, to be exact, in the Houston area, we have the CEO of Hylio, Mr. Arthur Erickson, who's going to be sitting down talking to us today about this company, about its initiative, investing into the agriculture spray drone industry. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, give a nice round of applause. I know it's going to sound corny, but let's give it a nice round of applause for our guest, Mr. Arthur Erickson, the CEO of Hylio. All right.
Hello. Appreciate the intro.
Mr. Erickson, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Definitely. Great. Definitely great to have you on. I know we had some little hiccups in the past, but we finally got it. Finally happened. But if you're catching this live, for the people that are catching this live, definitely comment. Tell us where you're checking in from. And if you're catching the playback, tell us where you're from as well. So without further ado, let's jump into this company. UAVs spraying, water and taking care of our culture and agriculture, because it's pretty easy to see that I like to eat. So let's talk about it. Can you please tell us about Hylio?
Sure, I'll give you the 2-minute backstory, so to speak. So Hylio was founded back in 2015. I am the CEO and one of the original co-founders. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Hey, Prince, can you hear me? Am I going through all right?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay, good. There's just a bit of a delay. But anyway, so Hylio
you got me? Can you hear me?
Yep. Hylio was started back in 2015 by me and two of my roommates at the University of Texas at Austin. So I was studying aerospace engineering at the time. I had a roommate that was a computer engineer and another roommate that was a finance student. So we had all the prerequisite human skills necessary to start this company, right? So the first thing we wanted to do actually was drone delivery. That was our first idea. We explored it for a little bit, but we eventually landed on agriculture. We all grew up in Texas. We're all from agricultural backgrounds. So it was always destined to be that way, right? For lack of a better phrase. So back in 2015, like I mentioned, we started the company. We prototyped a bit for a few years. We were in the ideation phase, just thinking about business models that would work. By 2017, we actually launched our company, commercially speaking. So we started servicing customers using our drones. These were early drone models at that time. We were just done prototyping, so they worked, but they weren't perfect. We used our own drones to service farmers. We would get paid per application, per acre that we sprayed. From that direct experience, being service operators using our own technology, we learned what worked, what didn't. We squashed all the software bugs that we needed to, improved the hardware, improved the entire system. And so by 2020, we were selling our drones to third parties, which was always the goal, right? So we never wanted to be a service company, but we were operating as a service company just to improve the product. So 2017 to 2019, we were spraying farmers, like I mentioned, getting paid per application that we did. Finally, 2020 comes around. Our product is mature enough to actually be sold off. So now what we do almost entirely, more than 99% of our commercial activity is just selling our drones and our software to third parties, typically farmers and other agribusinesses that use our drones to spray either their own crops or they spray other farmers' crops for money.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting that you guys started off as a delivery drone service in the beginning. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, you heard that correctly. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of intersecting principles, right? At least physically. So in the delivery space, you're just taking McDonald's or a cup of coffee to some location. It's the same principle for us in ag. You're delivering a payload. You just happen to be doing it in a different method. So instead of delivering McDonald's from point A to point B, you're delivering agrochemicals over a set area. So a lot of physical similarities, and we were able to actually retrofit a lot of our delivery technology to ag spraying technology. That opens up a whole nother subject about how drone technology is really cross-compatible across multiple industries, right? But that's another topic. Right now, we focus on agriculture.
Okay, so I don't want to harp on it, but what made you get out of the delivery space and into the agriculture space? Was it more promising, more profitable? What caused that?
Yeah, there was two primary reasons. The first being that the delivery space was very slow from a cash flow perspective for a small company like ours. We were a small startup. We weren't looking to get a bunch of funding at that time and give up a lot of the company. We wanted to just immediately start generating cash and be cash flow positive. It was very hard to do with delivery because delivery by nature requires scale for it to make sense financially. So if you're doing 10 deliveries a day, you're not really making enough money as a small startup to be self-sustaining. You have to be someone like Amazon, for example, for it to really make sense where you're doing 1 million deliveries a day and you're saving 5% on each delivery. And then the macroeconomics work out, right? Okay. For us, we just wanted that cash flow, that immediate connection to the customer, and we didn't want to go the deep VC route at that time. And that's what was required by our estimation to actually do the delivery thing properly.
All right. So let's get back into the actual space of how does we get forward to today? How does Hylio make money? How does it make money? I know for common sense that, hey, you sell a drone, but how do you generate cash flow?
Well, it's very simple. Right now, what Hylio does is we sell an integrated system. So that's the hardware, the drone itself, and all the accessories needed to operate it, and the software all together, bundled together. And those kits are anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 per unit, just depending on the model that you chose. So our smaller drones, less capacity, they're on the $20,000 end, and then the big guys are on the $40,000 end. So it's very simple for the customer. It's a turnkey solution. You pay that one ticket price. From then on, you have access to the drone, lifetime access to the software, and lifetime access to our technical support. So what we're doing is we're building out additional software features, add-ons, right, upgrades that are behind subscription fees or are pay as you use, and those are attached to our software suite. So you get free access to the software, or included access to the software when you first buy it. The base package, which is useful for pretty much everything you need to actually deploy these things. So it's the mission planning, the mission operations, so taking the drones off, landing them, monitoring them. You get all of that. And later on down the line, we're gonna be able to offer people data analysis tools and enterprise scale tools, which are again added on to this base software platform, and they're behind some sort of paywall that's fair for both us and the customer.
Okay. And the reason why I asked that question as an investor, you will want to know, like, okay, well, it's obvious that the company makes money with, selling their drones, but how will they generate money every month or every week or quarterly? Do they just got to keep selling drones until everybody has the drones? And now what happens? So that's why I was asking that question of like, how do you generate money besides just selling the drones? Do you have anything that says, hey, like you just mentioned about the software having the add-ons and people kind of can pay a recurring thing because we know cash flow is king. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Now I have to ask you this question, which was very shocking when I looked this up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think it was your form. I think it was K. that you filed. You know, Hylio, how would it become profitable? Because most of the companies that we see in these small micro phases, they're not profitable. You know, even look at companies like Uber, you know, and big major companies that are not profitable that we see all the time that are publicly traded. So I was very shocked to see in 2019 that you reported a net loss, but in 2020 you reported a net profit. Am I correct on that?
Yep, you are absolutely correct. And basically, it's simple. And this chalks up to supply and demand. Simply put, there's really no one else in the States doing what we're doing at this scale. There are foreign companies, DJI is a big one, that sell crop spraying drones, but that's a different subject. Point is, we're the only US company that's actually building this technology in-house, manufacturing it, and offering it to the American consumer base. And there's a huge need for it. These farmers, these ag producers, ag service providers, all have been dying to get their hands on a tool like this, technology like this. No one else is offering it. So we're in the right place at the right time. We chose the right industry, and demand is sky high, supply is very low. So that's where we're at.
Got it. Okay. Great positioning. Now we all know this. When we see the world of a business and things like that, somebody's going to come over there and be like, you know what, Hylio is making a nice profit. This company's valued at $35 million is what I saw. Valuated at $35 million at $3 something per share. Like you said, supply is low, demand is high, meaning the prices are going to react to that. And what are some major I also saw this in your risk factors as well in your financial statement. One of your risk factors that you listed was the next topic I want to get into. What is your competitive advantage? What if Apple and Tesla and some big tech companies come in and say, wow, John Deere comes along and says, you know what? We're serving tractors and whatever. Let's get into this drone space. What would be Hylio's competitive advantage?
Good question. So it's funny that you brought up John Deere. John Deere, they don't really do anything in-house anymore, right? What I mean is they would much rather just buy a small startup like Hylio because what we do, and when I say we, I mean generally us ag tech companies, what we do is very complicated. It involves a lot of moving parts. And even for a big company, even if you have all the money in the world, at the end of the day, you need boots on the ground that are going out there, putting a product to the test in the field, right? These are harsh conditions. You're working as a farmer, basically out there in the hot sun all day, 10 hours a day, testing these drones, see how effective they are in the field. And then you need to transmit that experience to a software development team and a mechanical engineering, a hardware development team that's going to improve the product. So the fact that there's so many disciplines combining into our product makes it really complicated to replicate. So again, this isn't something that just a factory in China can say, hey, copy that, because this thing is fine-tuned. It's not just a drone. It's the drone, the software, it's the agricultural knowledge, it's the process flow, all boiled down into one company, one product line. And we have people that are very skilled in all these disciplines working together, collaborating every day to make this better. It's a very difficult thing to copy because of how many different verticals it touches. It's like a symphony, right? Like you can have a great piano player, and maybe you can find plenty of those, but you need to have a great piano player that works really well with all these violinists and these cello players and stuff. So you got to have all the pieces come together, and no amount of money can really get that for you. And I know that was kind of a weird metaphor, but that's why John Deere just goes out and lets the market and lets these young entrepreneurs that are ambitious, they let them figure it out and go through the journey like we're doing now. And then once they actually have a product that's proven, that scaled itself up to a certain point, John Deere says, hey, I like that. And then they make you an offer. And you see that happen with like Blue River Technologies, right? So back in 2017, Blue River Technologies was doing a lot of machine learning for spot spraying applications. So I think one of the first main applications was they were identifying in lettuce fields when to turn nozzles on and when to turn nozzles off on tractors. So the tractor would have, let's say, 100 nozzles. This is just an example. And each of these nozzles, all 100 of them, had their own camera, and they would turn on and off only when they needed to, as opposed to just being on the entire time. So this resulted in a bunch of savings in the chemical that you utilized, which results in financial savings for the farmer, right? So John Deere saw that and was like, I want that. They bought that. They incorporated Blue River's technologies, See and Spray technology into John Deere's tractors. And they actually just did the same thing for another company called Bear Tractors in California. So that company, which you can look up, they focus on automating or making old tractors into autonomous tractors. So they've got a whole aftermarket kit. I believe they take your tractor, they outfit it with a bunch of hardware and software, and then they make it an autonomous tractor that doesn't need a driver anymore. John Deere plugged them up last year or this year. I don't remember exactly. So that's the modus operandi right now for the big ag players, the guys at the capital, is just to pick up guys like us, make us offers, usually just cash, right? Cash buyouts.
Okay. Now I got to ask you this question here. I'm going to get back to that with the buyouts and things like that. How do farmers currently water crop? Like, what are they doing now? Because, me being a little country boy from Georgia, I used to remember driving down the road and I would see these big old sprinkler systems and I would see tractors. And I thought, hey, that's how we water crop, is either we get rain or we got these big sprinkler systems that just shoot water all over the place. So is that still in 2021 how majority of farmers water their crop? Or have they gone to a agriculture drone type space yet?
So, okay, just to be clear, watering crops, irrigation, that's one subject, right? So getting water to hydrate the plants. Most people do that with just irrigation pipelines in the fields, right? And that's fairly easy. A lot of people do that. That's not really a big deal. But if we're talking about applying agrochemicals, which is what Hylio focuses on, then most people do that with traditional methods and machines, which include airplanes, helicopters, and tractor sprayers, which you could call ground rigs. There's plenty of names. So people are either they in-house have an airplane or a helicopter or a tractor they can utilize, or they're contracting that out to a third party or from a third party. Those are the main methods that they use now, all of which have pros and cons. There's not a lot of adoption yet, spray drones for applying agrochemicals. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a very new market. There's a lot of demand for it, but not a lot of adoption simply because no one else is offering it. We just started offering this beginning of last year, right?
Okay. So, so you're saying that, hey, Hylio doesn't focus on watering crops. It's more on putting the, I guess, the chemicals on the crops, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So Hylio's drones, they're for precise application of agrochemicals, typically in volumes from 2 to 3 gallons per acre. 2 to 3 gallons per acre. That's where you want to target in terms of the amount of product you're putting down over a given amount of land. Irrigation requires a lot of gallonage per acre, so there's no feasible way for our drones to handle that. They shouldn't. Like I said, there's already good infrastructure in place for most farms for irrigation. It's center pivots, right, which is just like a structure that has tubing on it or piping on it that can deliver water, and it can move, kind of like those rotating sprinklers that people have in their lawns. Imagine that, but on a massive scale. Most people utilize those, or they've got nice pipelines actually laid beneath their crops that can just deliver the water. But yes, just to be clear, our drones focus on the agrochemicals itself. It's you're spraying chemicals mixed with water. Typically, water is called the carrier in this case. But again, it's 2 to 3 gallons per acre tops is what you're targeting.
Now, why do they need to use a drone to deliver the chemical when they can just, since they already have a spray system, like you said, with the water? Why don't they just utilize the water, to say, hey, just add a little chemicals in there and let it spray all over the place?
That's interesting.
If I sound ignorant on the topic, but I'm when it comes down to farming, I got the basic concept, but that's about it,
No, yeah. So I completely understand. It's a good question. There is such thing. So people call that fertigation, right? Fertigation typically refers to fertilizing your plants or your crops while you're watering them. And people will do that via their traditional irrigation channels. Now, the reason why you don't do it with chemicals or pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, stuff like that is you don't want to pollute your water system with those chemicals, right? Those chemicals are meant for very specific instances. So one part out of the year for a given week or something like that, you're going to have a fungus problem on your corn, for example. In that week, you want to apply as little fungicide as possible, right? Because you want to reduce the amount of collateral damage and the amount of money that you spend treating this fungus, right? So you want to reduce the amount of chemical or minimize the amount of chemical you're spraying. You want to get just the right amount of chemical where it needs to go to kill this fungus and save your corn crop. And that's why the drones are really important. They're a good revolution in this regard, because they're finally a tool that's precise enough for you to identify and then only spray the areas with the fungus. Now, yeah, there's a lot of issues with the current methodology, which is high boom sprayers, for example, which we talked about. So tractors, the vast majority of the tractors on the market, they're only useful for just blanket spraying. They call it broadcast spraying in the industry. So you just spray everything. It's like a brute force approach. I'm going to spray my entire field for fungus with this fungicide. And as you might imagine, you end up spraying a lot of your field that doesn't have any fungus, and it's practically useless. So you're just taking a brute force approach just to make sure that you protect your crops, but you're overspending both in time and money in the form of the product, the fungicide that you're purchasing and putting down. So the traditional example is you've got a cornfield or a soybean field with, let's say, 10 to 20% of it infected with fungus. This fungus could spread kind of like a cancer if you don't treat it, but it's only on 10 to 20% of your field. So traditionally, you go out there with your high boom sprayer, your tractor, you spray everything, and it costs you maybe $20-$30 per acre, right? So imagine you're spraying all of that, 1,000 acres. It's costing you $2,000 to $3,000 for that 1,000 acres for all of that. Or you could spend a tenth of that and just spray where the fungus is, 10% of that. So you're spraying $200, right? Or sorry, missed it by math. 20,000 to 30,000 for the entire field, or 2,000 to 3,000 using our drones. Does that make sense? I don't want to overcomplicate the math.
Definitely made, that's what I hit my little sound effect of the gym. That's when the light bulb kind of went off for me to say, oh, okay. So initially when I thought, I said, oh, you have a drone that's going to water crops, right? And then you just let me know that, hey, we already got a watering system that's taken care of. We're talking about systems that are, let's say if I'm growing, like you said, I'm growing corn, and a certain batch of corn has a fungus or something like that going on. And instead of spraying the fungus everywhere in this big field, I can just pinpoint it with a drone to fly over and say, hey, this is where the fungus is, apply just enough in this particular area. Yep, that's why you heard me hit this right here. But that was the dollar sign. Like, okay, now it's clicking in my head of what's the competitive advantage? Because right now, if I was a farmer and I did not utilize a drone, what are farmers doing right now?
Like we talked about, they're going out there, they're just spraying everything. So they're taking their tractor out there and they're just like, I can't identify where this fungus is and isn't. And this tractor itself isn't even capable of just spraying one area. It's got these huge booms. It's 120 feet wide. So you just have to spray everything. Like that's how it physically is set up. You don't have an option. You don't have a say in the matter if you're a farmer today with that traditional equipment.
Okay. Now I want to get into some of these comments here. What's going on, Al? Al says, the principal investor, good evening. Good evening to you as well. Al's catching in live. Brock in, what's going on? He says, good evening, Prince. Thank you for tuning in as well. Now I want to ask you this next question. You hit on this earlier. And I think that's where you was kind of going with this, because I'm looking into your eyes there, Arthur. I saw something there. So the future of Hylio, I wanted to make sure I got all three syllables, going public. Are you looking to future? Are you looking to take it public one day to put it on the NASDAQ stock exchange? Or if you just looking to, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take this to one of the big players and say, John Deere, give me $5 billion and Hylio is now yours. You can throw your name on it and I'll sell you off the technology. Which one are you looking to do there? Because it sounds, when we were speaking about it earlier, you were like, hey, I have an exit strategy. So what is the exit strategy? What's going on in that CEO mind of yours?
Well, the classic answer to this is we're going to do what creates the most shareholder value for our shareholders. So the ag tech industry is, for lack of a better word, exploding right now. There's a lot of movers and shakers that are coming into the ag tech space that weren't here traditionally. So VC firms that used to just focus on .com stuff, software companies, they're moving into the ag tech space. So the point I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of unknowns right now in terms of what are going to be the traditional exiting channels. At the end of the day, we're going to do what, again, gives us the most valuation. What's the highest price tag for us? Right now, I think that the clearest exit strategy is to hook up with John Deere, Bayer, one of these big traditional ag companies, like we were talking about earlier, that has a proven interest in picking up startups like mine that can provide better bottom line value to their existing product line. So John Deere, for example, would say, hey, we've got these autonomous tractors that work really well, but still they can't hit hard to reach places. And they're still not precise enough to only hit 5-10% of the field if we want them to. So they're going to couple their autonomous tractors with Hylio spray drones. It's going to be part of their ecosystem. I think that's the clearest path right now. That being said, there's also evidence to show that ag tech startups can go public. There's the famous UAVS, Ag Eagle. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but this company, Ag Eagle, it was a relatively small startup based out of Kansas, I believe, or somewhere in the Midwest, possibly. They went public, I think 2 years ago, and it's a funny story because their stock value has gone up and down. They're one of those companies almost caught up in the GameStop kind of frenzy, stuff like that.
Squeeze, yeah.
But they are at least one data point showing that startups in the ag space can also go public and be successful, at least from a share price standpoint. So long story short, I think that a merger or acquisition with a big ag tech player is the most likely strategy for us, but going public is not out of the question either.
Okay. Now got a question here coming in live. I think Brockian is out of Canada. He said, who is your main competitor and what are the barriers to entry? So he's want to know, hey, who's your main competitor? Who's that person you got your eyeball on? And that barrier of entry of, regulations, you know what the barrier of entry is. So I'm just saying this for the audience. For the audience, the barrier of entry is it's a competitive advantage that a lot of companies use because how quickly can someone else pick up what you're doing? Now you touched on this early in the interview with your technology, and we spoke about this with your competitive advantage. But Brockian has this question for you. Who's your main competitor and what's your barrier of entry?
By far, our biggest competitor is DJI. They are a Chinese-based company. They sell maybe 80% of the world's drones right now. So they practically have a monopoly on drones, and they focus mainly on camera drones, but they do have a department that does crop spraying drones, much like our drones. Now, the big difference between their drones and our drones right now, and we intend to maintain this edge, is that their software is very clunky, for lack of a better word, very unintuitive, frequently crashes. Their path planning algorithms, their mission planning user interface is not very intuitive. And Hylio's software is our main focus. The software, I think, is the vast majority of the value in our product. So the ability to actually plan these missions, to draw these areas on your fields, and to define the spray parameters that you want, and for all that to flow intuitively and smoothly from you, the operator, through the computer to the drone, that's the magic. And that's taken us over half a decade to get to where it is right now. It's really good, way better than DJI software, and all of our customers can attest to that. We have several customers that have used both, of course. So if you talk to any of them, which I guess you won't, but maybe you will, you'll see that there's a huge difference in the software. The software is very hard to replicate. Chinese companies traditionally, software is not their strong suit. And you can see that with, almost they have copycat products for a lot of American or European tech companies or tech products. And the quality is just, it's not the same. And so that's Hylio's advantage in a nutshell. Our software is far superior. It's much better designed. It's scalable. It's designed to be deployed en masse to thousands and millions of users in the near future. Can't say the same about DJI's software. Other barriers to entry, besides software being incredibly hard to develop, is regulations. So DJI is also famous, and they're in the news often because they're banned for federal contracts. So if you're a federal contractor, or if you receive funding from the federal government here in the United States, if you're a university, for example, a public one, you cannot purchase or utilize DJI drones because DJI got in trouble with the US government for security concerns. There's been compelling evidence to suggest that some DJI products at least have been used to send data back to the government of China of critical infrastructure here in the States. So that includes military installations, but also farming data and stuff like that. A lot of that has allegedly been sent back to the Chinese government, which our government is not very happy about. So DJI is in hot water for sure regarding these bans. Right now they're on the federal level. It might be that DJI is also banned just in general, blanket ban here in the States. I'm not sure, but it's a possibility. So there's a lot of aversion. The fact that DJI is banned federally makes a lot of people in the private sector hesitant to buy them because there's that uncertainty of whether or not they'll be legal to use going to the future, right? Like we were just talking about. So those are the two big ones. The regulatory environment is not conducive to DJI. It's conducive to the only American company right now that's making spray drones, which is us. And also our software is far superior, and we invest very rapidly into our software development.
Okay. Brock Gann followed up. He said he agrees with you. Yes, very, very true. So all the software is developed in North America is what he's asking.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Now, the next question I wanted to get to you about was we spoke about the profitability. We spoke about the competitive. If today, right, with your exit strategy, which we kind of hit on a little bit, kind of beat up a little bit, what would be that price tag? I know you're saying 35 million is the value right now, but I don't think you would sell it for 35 million. I know you're probably not going to answer that number here, obviously, right? But in the ballpark figure of how would you look at things of pushing it out, like a price tag, if you were to sell it out today?
If we were to sell it today, yeah, I'm hesitant to give you an answer. It's certainly not going to be for 35 million because you raise money at 35 million, which is our value by a lot of legitimate metrics. But, we think that in just a year or so of holding on and do what we do, we could really expand that value, right? So maybe double or triple it. I wouldn't sell as a CEO for my company. I wouldn't settle for anything less than 100 million right now if we were to sell all up. But call it arrogant or naive. I definitely think this could be a unicorn. So chances are we're going to hold out until we get a $1 billion price tag.
Woo, I like that.
IPO, whatever it is, we're holding out for that.
I like that because, I will say this to put a disclaimer out there, prior to this episode, I had not invested into Hylio. I wanted to sit down and bring the CEO on and talk to him. So especially, I would feel like an idiot if you go off and sell it for $10 billion and you'll be like, hey, remember when I came onto your show and it was like, we were talking about 100 million and you didn't put any money into it. So for right now, ladies and gentlemen, for everybody that's catching this live in the playback, they have an offering right now. You can look up their financial reports. It's a profitable company at $3.58. That's been offered on Start Engine, where they're doing a pre-IPO, kind of the platform where it is. And, they're into the agriculture space. I definitely like what you had to say there. I thought that when I saw it, I thought that you was watering grass. I said, okay, he's watering the agriculture. That sounds pretty cool. But then you let me know, like, hey, Prince, we don't put water on the crops. We're talking about, farmers are having issues with slowing things down. That was the question I kind of want to push into about the food shortage and how you were backing up, how Hylio was not contributing, but helping out with the coming food shortages that we're having. That's the question I want to ask about.
Sure. So food's interesting. The thing is, and I'm speaking generally here, right? I'm not the god of food science, so take this with a grain of salt. But the general consensus, from what I know, is that we do have the resources on this planet to produce enough food for everybody. But the problem is we can't get these resources logistically to the people that need them. By resources, I mean chemicals, so fertilizers, but also pest control agents, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, chemicals basically that can improve people's yields, right? We have the capability to produce these. It's a matter of getting them to primarily a lot of countries in the developing world don't employ a lot of 21st century ag chemicals that can greatly improve their yields. They don't know about them. There isn't the infrastructure for selling it set up in these countries. And most of all, there isn't the physical devices needed to dispense these chemicals in these developing nations. So I don't know if you've ever been to Central America, for example, but here in the United States, like almost every farmer has a tractor. That is certainly not the case in Central America. They don't have John Deere, and I mean they have John Deere stores there. Maybe a handful in each region, but it's not like up here, right? There's way less infrastructure and way less capital for heavy farming equipment down there. So most people down there are still doing a lot of the chemical application by hand. So it's people going out either with a backpack and they're spraying it, kind of like you'd spray like ant killer maybe, or they're just literally like throwing seeds out with their hand. And I've seen that countless of times when I'm working down in Central America. So it's not really feasible for these developing countries to develop the infrastructure, I think, at this point, to have all these big tractors and planes and helicopters that we enjoy here in America, for example. But what they can do, much like they did in Africa, where they leapfrog landlines and went to cell phones, they can leapfrog tractors and whatnot, big, heavy, bulky equipment, leapfrog to spray drones. And so we actually do a lot of work in Central America. So I can tell you firsthand that a lot of these guys can't afford tractors, but they have been able to afford our drones, which are usually 10 or 15% of the price of a tractor, even less than that. And they're able to utilize this to greatly expand their usage of agrochemicals and other products that help their crops. So whereas they used to be able to maybe put out, an acre, okay, let's give you an example, like 2 or 3 acres per hour, which would be a hectare, right? A hectare is 2.5 acres, roughly. These guys with manual laborers, they could treat maybe 2.5 acres per hour. Now with our drones, they could treat 20 to 30 acres per hour. So you're seeing that huge efficiency increase, which they otherwise wouldn't have had without access to our drones and our technology. So long story short, our drones are a medium for a lot of farmers across the world, mostly in developing nations, to vastly improve their crops, just by the simple fact of being able to physically dispense products much more efficiently than they previously could. So they've been gridlocked by lack of capital, lack of access to big tractors and stuff like that. Now they can get our drones delivered to them much cheaper, much faster, and they're much more usable.
Okay. I'm going to take one more question here from the live audience. I can't say the name here, A919QF. They said, since farmers who wish to employ your technology would require a license by passing the commercial drones exam, could this be a limitation on the mainstream adoption? So, they're saying that if people went out and got your drones, they have to go out and have a license to fly your drones. Could this slow you down from going to the mainstream?
Yes and no. Essentially, it's the same amount of barrier to entry or barrier to adoption that a driver's license would be, right? So to buy a car, to drive a car, I should say, you need a driver's license. The Part 107, which you can look up, it's an FAA, it's the small UAS pilot certification, which I think you mentioned here in your question. That is fairly easy to get. You could study for it and receive it in about a week or two, is what I typically see. So I think it's on par with the difficulty of a car driver's exam. I don't think, just based on how many cars sell in this country, I don't think that's going to be a big deal. Now, that being said, there is something called the FAA Part 137, which is a separate certification that you need if you want to use drones for crop spraying. So our customers do need to have that to legally spray with our drones in the United States. That, admittedly, is a bit of a hassle to get. We help all of our customers do it. So we provide the documentation. We tell them who to apply, or which office to apply to. We kind of help them out, hold their hand through that process. It can take several months. It is annoying. It's just paperwork, so it's mostly just a waiting game. it's frustrating, and it's something that we hope that the FAA is going to ease up on. They've already shown their track record has been to ease up on regulations for drones, or at least to streamline them. So they do put more registration stuff in place where they're able to track drones, to know who owns them and who flew them where. That's fine. We're actually completely in support of that, but we also want them to make the certification process easier and faster by digitalizing it and just making the application process make more sense. There's a lot of bloat there, right? Because they created this application process from existing legacy systems that they use for airplanes and helicopters. So there needs to be much smarter legislation that's geared towards drones. It is coming along, so there is light at the end of the tunnel. We've seen that Part 107 process get way more streamlined from 5 or 6 years ago. It's way faster now. You could do it online. So there's signs that it's going in the right direction, but admittedly, that is something that is going to have to get easier, I think, for this to be widely adopted by everybody.
Good question there. You know, I got to give the good question there, bringing in that nice little barrier of entry that I didn't think about there. But our time has come towards the end of the interview. First, I got to ask you, did you enjoy your time here?
Yeah, of course. This was great.
Definitely. Would you come back on to the Investor Show?
Sure, yeah. Name the time and place.
Okay. Next time it might be in person. Next time I'm in Houston, maybe I could stop by and we could do it live, right?
Yeah, you could come by the shop. That'd be awesome.
Nice. Okay. So I want to ask you, so out there, what do you want to leave with the people? How can they follow you? How can they get more of Hylio? How can they find out about more? How can they find Arthur, all of the great stuff? How can they invest? Let them know. This is your time.
So our website is fantastic. We have a lot of good people working on it. hyl.io. The domain is IO. So hyl.io, Hylio. That's the website. Please go visit it. A lot of good resources on there to learn more about our drone, but also just the industry in general, the problems that we're solving. We have a great tool if you're interested in buying a drone. We have something called the Build Your Drone section of the site. Basically, you can go in there, you can view the models, you can generate quotes. Finally, we are raising money, which has been mentioned several times, on Start Engine. Start Engine's been a really good platform for us. It really lowers the barrier to entry for everyday people to get involved in really exciting startups like ours. So please go to Start Engine. We really want as much support as we can get. We're raising money for what I think are the right reasons, to develop really cool cutting edge technology that's going to set us apart and build valuation. We don't need the money to survive, right? So it's different. We are a cash flow positive company. This isn't like a Hail Mary for us. This is money going to really great value multiplying technology that we're developing in-house that no one else has. So please support us. I'm very confident about the future of this industry. It's crazy that we're still pretty much the only people doing it. Now's the time to get in if you're going to get in, and just look into ag investing in general. You'll see that it's been criminally underrated, I think, as an investment sphere. So if you get in now, I'm fairly confident you won't regret your decision.
All right. Well, you heard it from the CEO of Hylio. Oh, that kind of rhymed too. Hylio CEO. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
So you heard it there for him. Okay. Well, you got one supporter, Miss Taylor here said, I will be supporting. So definitely glad to see that you're supporting. Valued at $35 million. Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Valued at $35 million at 100 minimum investment right now, $200. Profitable company. That is, definitely thank you for enlightening. And definitely, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and children of all ages, my name is Prince Dykes. This is the Investor Show. And to the next video, podcast, cartoon, book, or whatever else crazy you see me do around the globe, peace, be safe. I'm out, and thank you.